Hi, I'm Paul Varian, President of Sports Management Consultancy, Capitis Consulting. In 2011, at Ontario Soccer's annual conference in Cambridge, Ontario, approximately 80 clubs and academies had a meeting. The purpose of the meeting was quite simple. What can we agree on in terms of how Ontario's top playing talent can be developed to be their best? In that meeting, the clubs came away with several concepts and ideas that would later become the Ontario Player Development League, or OPDL for short. These ideas were taken to Ontario Soccer, and Ontario Soccer built a technical advisory committee, a committee made up of top technical leaders from clubs and academies and other affiliates of the association. Out of that, technical standards were built, and a resultant business model for how this program would run to take Ontario's top talent and help them be their best. In 2012 and 2013, the program gradually took shape. And finally, in 2014, the OPDL kicked off. In that first year in 2014, the league kicked off with 16 license holders, fielding 32 teams, boys and girls, in just one age group, under 13. In the subsequent years, the program built out to include more age groups, U14, U15, and a U16-17 age group. And over the preceding years, the league and program developed. League design was modified, technical lessons were learned, standards were tweaked to make the program as effective as possible. In 2020 and 2021, the world was gripped with the COVID-19 global pandemic. And like with all of life, the OPDL was affected and disruption occurred. But in 2022, the league is back to full operation, now with 29 license holder clubs. The OPDL has 5 fundamental objectives. Number 1, allow top youth talent to develop optimally without the pressure of a promotion-relegation-based system. Number 2, raise base standards in training and coaching in organisation where the province's top youth players play. Number 3, create a standardised system of elite player training and development in line with world best practices. Number 4, provide a centralised structure that allows Ontario talent to be scouted more frequently and consistently. Number 5, ultimately provide the best opportunity for Ontario's top soccer talent to progress to higher levels of soccer. Capitis Consulting was privileged to undertake a 2-year review of the OPDL in 2016. And last year, 2022, we were called back to undertake a comprehensive 8-year review of the program. The results of this evaluation I'm going to present to you right now. There we go, OPDL quality right there. Okay, here we go, this evaluation, 8-year evaluation of the OPDL. And the way we're going to structure this evaluation, folks, is we looked at this league through basically taking a stakeholder approach. And there are 4 key stakeholders in this program. The first one's obvious, the players themselves, the very people whose technical excellence we're trying to better to unleash and unlock their full potential. But there are other actors around that core group of players. The first, of course, is the coaches. So we made an assessment of how the OPDL has furthered and bettered and developed the coaches therein. The third one is match officials, often overlooked, but crucial because the OPDL is an environment not only for bettering players, but coaches and, of course, match officials who officiate the league games. And finally, the license holder clubs themselves, who essentially at the end of the day run this program and are absolutely essential in terms of building sustainable excellence into it. So we looked at it this way. Players, basically, how well have the players progressed? Coaches, how stronger is the overall coaching community in Ontario? Match officials, how well are match officials developing? And license holders, how capable and sustainable are license holder clubs who operate the program? So let's start with the players. And the first thing, which is really, I think, probably the most important and compelling thing that we found in this study, is that undoubtedly in our mind, OPDL players are achieving higher level soccer opportunities. And here are some of the facts that back that up. 74.2% to 92.7% of OPDL players now make up the Ontario Soccer provincial program. That's a very high statistic, of course. And beyond that, one of the measures that Ontario Soccer has been looking at for the success of this program is how well are players progressing into higher level national team structures. And the results are there again. 60% of national team players are now from Ontario in 2020, compared to 51% in 2016. Another important measure is how many OPDL players have graduated into League One Ontario. League One Ontario is a relatively new league designed to develop players from early adulthood to be, hopefully, full-time professionals or adult elite players. The league was set up essentially so that players who've come through the OPDL could graduate into League One Ontario. But since OPDL only started in 2014 with an under-13 age group, there's been a relatively small opportunity for players from the league to move in to League One Ontario. But the results are still there. 436 players who have played in the OPDL now play in League One Ontario, which constitutes nearly 30% of all League One Ontario players, 29.6% to be precise. The second outcome we found in terms of player development for the OPDL is that the OPDL player base is becoming more robust and established. Now, this is to be expected as the league has grown in players from its inception in 2014. It started with 727 players in 2014, but this year, 4,654 players played in the OPDL. Retention of players in 2014-15 was at 70.2%, but that's risen to 74.6% in 2018-2019. We also have learnt that distribution of players has improved as the number of players has increased, as this graphic here shows. As you can see, when we started in 2014 with the program, most of the players were around, obviously, where those license holders were based, which were largely clustered in urban areas around the GTA and Ottawa. But now we've gradually increased, and there are more players represented, particularly in the southwestern Ontario and the area between Ottawa, Kingston, and the Niagara and Golden Horseshoe Belt. There is obviously more work to be done here. There are large areas of this map where you can see where OPDL is not serving players. And that will be impossible to completely fill, because the reality is there are parts of the country that simply can't sustain an OPDL license holder club. But there is still room for improvement, and as the league expands, I'm sure the intention will be for distribution of players to become more robust. The third outcome we found with respect to players is most players who leave the OPDL continue to play in some way. And this is a very important measure, because the designers of this program were very conscious of the fact that we didn't want to create something that might develop the top players, but also drive a lot of players away from the game. That will be counterintuitive. But that, for the large part, is not happening. Indeed, 76.9% of players who are over the age of 16 who used to play in the OPDL still play the game today. The most common place for them to play is in Ontario Soccer regional leagues or in college and university environments. But importantly, over 17% of those players do play now in pro, semi-pro or pro-am environments, which was obviously the development goal of the program in the first place. In terms of why players don't play anymore, they usually relate to issues related to the cost of the league, participation in high performance, coaching issues, or just basic enjoyment of the game has waned over time. Let's move on to the second criterion of evaluation, which is that of coaches. The first outcome we wanted to talk about today is what we found is OPDL coaches are becoming more diversely qualified, younger, and more gender diverse. Importantly, over half of OPDL coaches have taken further qualifications in the last 2 years. And that's very important, because the culture that this program is intended to drive into coaches is one of continuous development and continually better themselves. So, for the large part, most coaches in this program continue to take further qualifications. Again, as this league has been built and as this program has been developed out, so has a modernization of coaching qualifications been developed by Canada Soccer to build more appropriate licenses and qualifications for advanced youth development. 58.5% of OPDL coaches now have at least a C license, and 37.7% have a youth license. The age of OPDL coaches is also declining. Coaches are getting younger. The average age of an OPDL coach in 2014 was 47. It's now 44 in 2021. And here's a big and really important one. Participation of female coaches in the OPDL has vastly improved. When the league kicked off and the program kicked off in 2014, the percentage of female representation in coaches was just 12.8%. It's now 38.6% in 2021. That's more than a threefold increase. Across soccer and sport in general, a lot of organizations and individuals have been very keen, quite rightly, to improve female leadership in sports and female coaching. But a lot of efforts have not produced much results, sadly, to date. To triple that score is very, very impressive, and a sign that the league's requirements are working in terms of building better diversity and better opportunities for female coach leadership in Ontario soccer. The second outcome we found is OPDL license holders are sourcing more coaches from within their club, but they could invest more in their development. When this league started in 2014, the requirements to have highly qualified coaches was quite new to the system. Many clubs had to source these coaches from outside their organization. But because of the improved coach development systems they've now built into their organizations, over half of OPDL coaches are now sourced from within the license holder club, 54.6%. to be precise. This is a very important measure in terms of building sustainability into the league and sustainability into license holder clubs. But there's room for improvement. One of the key things that the league has tried to build is a reputation for high quality coach education. And our measures show that there's some room for improvement there. OPDL coaches rate the coach education they're receiving in the license holder clubs at 67.2%, which is not bad, but clearly room for improvement, and most high-performance clubs would think so. And coach education budgets in license holder clubs are down by 9.1% from the league's inception in 2014 to 2021. But we should be very mindful that we have just gone through a 2-year global pandemic, and obviously a lot of these clubs have been in a process of day-to-day survival and probably have not been in a position to look at heightened coach education budgets at that time. In terms of players' assessment of the coaching they receive, the quality of the coaching they receive, players over the age of 16 rate their coaching quality at 60.5%, and the parents of kids U15 and below rate it at 68.4%. Let's move on and talk about match officials. The first thing I would say is match officials are more numerous, younger, and are at more advanced levels through the OPDL. The number of match officials officiating the OPDL in 2015 was 355. That rose to 560 in 2021. So we're using more match officials. And the age of these match officials is decreasing, not by a huge amount. Nevertheless, we're showing a decline in the average age of match officials. And the average levels is increasing too. The average level of a match official in 2016 was 6.97, it's risen to 7.06 in 2021. And the female representation, contrary to what I've just described in the coaches, has actually declined from 9.5% in 2015 to 8.8% in 2021. An area of potential concern for match officials with respect to OPDL is that OPDL is not as competitive in terms of attracting match officials and is reliant pretty much on a core group of experienced match officials. We see this in that the average game load, number of games a match official is taking on average in the OPDL, has increased from 6.1 in 2015 to 7.3 in 2021. And the number of match officials who are taking more than 20 games, which is a heavy game load, has increased from 16 officials in 2016 to 37 in 2021. So if more officials are taking on more games. Match officials rate their developments in the OPDL at just 52.3%. And the biggest hindrance to match officials getting involved in taking OPDL matches is that of game fees. So what we're finding is that there's a lot of opportunities for match officials to participate and take games across the system in Ontario, and that's particularly the case with the introduction of League One. And they're choosing to take games that are not OPDL for a variety of reasons, often related to convenience, distance, cost, expense coverage, and so. What we can say is, yes, the OPDL is very much helping develop match officials. The challenge is getting match officials to participate in the program. Finally, let's talk about license holder clubs, the soccer organizations where this program is actually delivered from a training and a match play standpoint. And the first thing that's very important, and I think very encouraging, is license holder clubs understand the importance of their OPDL license and the impact it's having on their club. OPDL license holder clubs are in 80% agreement that their OPDL license is bettering their club. They're in 81.4% agreement that it's strengthening their club brand. 77.2% of them are in agreement with the technical standards that the OPDL prescribes. 74.2% of them believe the OPDL is helping develop their players, and 70% of them believe that they're helping develop their coaches. So there's a clear understanding that the OPDL as a structured organization, but as a brand, is valuable and worth holding a license for. And that's very important because, as we all know, if you don't see the value in something, you won't want to participate in it. But the organizations, challenges as they might have on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis, they see that being involved in this is worthwhile, and that's really important. Also, a fear when this program initially launched was that the cost of delivering it would be too prohibitive and would create tremendous financial risk to the license holder clubs and potentially break those organizations. Well, that's actually the opposite has happened. License holder clubs are becoming financially stronger. Net assets, on average across license holder clubs, are up by 8%. License holder clubs are consistently posting net surpluses, some large, some small, but there are consistent surpluses. Their balance sheets are strong liquidity, and they are improving. And their revenue diversification, in terms of the number of different lines that they draw revenue from, is improving too. So there's less financial risk built into their operation as opposed to more. That's surprising, but again, very encouraging from a sustainability standpoint. The OPDL cannot function without strong, sustainable, well-led license holder clubs, and all the signs of this evaluation show that that is, for the large part, in place. And finally, what I'd say with respect to license holder clubs is the OPDL impacts return rates for OPDL players, but not overall registrations at an organization. So within the OPDL itself, there's clear a strength and alignment and brand conviction around this program. Over 75% of OPDL players aged 16 or more say the OPDL is either a quite or extremely important reason for them to be at the club. They're there because of this program. 76% of OPDL parents actually say they would move their child if their club didn't have an OPDL license anymore. So they're there for the OPDL. However, what we see is the overall registration base for OPDL clubs is declining more than the average for Ontario. So the attractiveness in bringing players to OPDL clubs to participate in the OPDL is not translated to other player registrations around the program. So what does all this mean? Let's sum this up. Thinking back to 2011 in that room in Cambridge, the goal was, how do we give our best talent the best opportunities, the best environment to fulfill their potential and be their best? The OPDL program is working. It's providing heightened opportunity for Ontario's top players, but also top coaches and match officials as well. There's no question the OPDL remains a substantial investment for players and their parents. But that is the fact for any high-performance program in youth in any sport in Canada today. That's not to say we shouldn't worry about cost, but to have quality that produces the player performance results we're talking about takes investment. But there's been benefits that I don't think were being expected when this league was built and this program was built in 2010, 2011, 2012. The outlook there was singularly a player focus. But the system of Ontario soccer has benefited immensely from not only the standards, but the culture that's been enshrined in the game here through the OPDL. The OPDL brand is strong and entrenched in Ontario soccer. The program matters. If you were to take it away, a lot of people that we have found from our research will be unhappy. Sure, the OPDL has challenges with respect to scalability, for example, and associated capacity, but it's working. It's a heavy investment. It's taken a lot of leadership, patience and commitment from a lot of people, not only in Ontario soccer, but in their affiliates. The decision to progress with and execute the OPDL program was a brave one. It took courage. It cut across the grain of what was normal in how youth soccer players, not only in Ontario, but across Canada, were developed. It pushed people to change what they thought was possible. But it's worked. And more importantly, it's moved what people thought was not possible to now be the norm in how youth players are developed in this country. Our evaluation says the OPDL works.